The council chamber of the Galactic Concord was a monument to tranquility, a place of soft light and softer voices, where conflict was a theoretical abstraction discussed over millennia. Today, however, a ripple of amused curiosity disturbed its peace. Archon Valerius, the Ixian strategist whose crystalline form reflected the chamber's calm blues, manipulated a holographic display. It showed a blue-green world, third from its unremarkable yellow star, the third planet in the Sol system. Designation Terra. The inhabitants call themselves humans. A low, melodic hum of disdain emanated from the Rill Overseer, a being of flowing energy contained within a protective suit, a pre-emergent species. Their technological signature is quaint. Combustion-propelled projectiles? Fission-based explosives? They still war among themselves over ideological and resource-based conflicts. It is almost charming in its barbarism. The image is shifted, crude tanks rolling across deserts, aircraft leaving chemical trails in the atmosphere, soldiers firing weapons that used controlled explosions to throw pieces of metal. The progenitor swarm does not find it charming, stated Sentinel Prime Calyx, his carapace clicking with subdued anxiety. His species, the insectoid Cathari, had been the Concord shield for centuries and were now buckling. The swarm bypasses our energy shields. It consumes our plasma cannons. It is at the gates of the core systems. We need soldiers who can fight on the ground the swarm has taken. We need brutality. Valerius gestured dismissively. Brutality without sophistication is just noise. Look at their primary infantry weapon. He zoomed in on a rifle, a gunpowder-actuated kinetic thrower. The projectile is non-guided, limited by ballistic arc, and each soldier can carry only a few hundred. Compared to our standard-issue particle lancer, limitless shots, pinpoint accuracy, effective at 5 times the range. Yet, Calyx persisted, their history is a continuous tapestry of warfare. Their world itself is a Class 12 death world. Extreme temperature variances, corrosive atmosphere, predatory fauna, tectonic instability. They evolved resilience, a resilience of accident, not design, chimed in the Rill Overseer. We will take what we need. Their planet is rich in base minerals useful for our war effort. If they resist, we will pacify them. It will be a logistical exercise, not a battle. A show of force from a single battlecruiser should suffice to compel compliance. The decree was made. The mighty Concord vessel Judgment of Terran, a 5-kilometer-long sword of polished alloy and shimmering shield projectors, would descend to Earth's orbital space. Its mission: to secure human surrender and resource rights. The assumption of effortless victory was absolute. They never considered that to humanity, a show of force was not an end of conflict, but its opening move. The Judgment of Terran hung in geosynchronous orbit over the region known as the United States Atlantic Command. Its commander, Prelate Solon, watched the holotank with serene detachment. The planet below was a jewel, marred only by the frantic, primitive electromagnetic chatter of its inhabitants. News networks spoke of the alien visitor. Governments issued confused statements. There was fear, yes, but also a startling amount of defiance. Open a channel to their major population centers, Solon commanded, his voice a smooth baritone. Broadcast in all their languages. Display our image. They must see the face of their new masters. On billions of screens across the planet, the serene, elegant visage of Prelate Solon appeared. People of Terra, we are the Galactic Concord. Your world has been designated a resource protectorate. You will cease all military operations. You will surrender your planetary governance to our administrators. Comply, and your existence will be permitted. Resist, and you will be reminded of your place. In a hardened bunker beneath the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, General Arthur Iron Miller watched the broadcast, his jaw a granite line. Around him, the hushed tension of the Combined Operations Center was a physical thing. Arrogant son of a bitch, he muttered to his deputy, Colonel Chen. They didn't even ask. They just declared, All global commands are reporting in, sir, Chen said, her voice tight. Readiness state DEFCON 1. Strategic forces are primed, but sir, they're shields. Our satellites show the energy readings are off the scale. Our missiles might as well be thrown rocks. Miller's eyes never left the tactical map. We don't fight their fight, Colonel. We fight ours. Execute Protocol Ares, and get me a link to the Odyssey. In orbit, Prelate Solon awaited the inevitable cascade of surrender notices. Instead, his communications officer looked perplexed. Prelate, we are receiving a directed encrypted tight beam transmission. Source, a human orbital platform. It is a data packet labeled Formal Response. Display it. The main viewer changed. It showed a human male older with a steely gaze in a uniform adorned with ribbons to the unidentified vessel in Earth orbit. This is General Arthur Miller of the United Sol Defense Command. You are in violation of sovereign space. Power down your weapons and shields and submit to boarding for inspection. You have 1 minute to comply. A beat of stunned silence filled the judgment's bridge. Then a ripple of amused chirps and clicks from the crew. Solon allowed himself a thin smile, a death-world bravado, pitiable. Target their largest naval formation in the ocean below, the one they call the Carrier Strike Group. Eliminate it. A lesson in scale, the Judgment's ventral particle, Lancer array, glowed with captured starfire. A beam of incandescent blue energy lanced down, a spear of godlike power. It struck the Atlantic Ocean where the USS Gerald R. Ford and its escorts had been steaming just moments before. 5 million tons of seawater flashed to steam. The ships were simply erased, along with a circular kilometer of the ocean's surface. On the bridge, Solon nodded. Now, send the demand again, and Prelate, the sensor officer cried, its melodic voice sharp with confusion. Multiple launches, from the planetary surface, hundreds, thousands, projectiles on ballistic trajectories, primitive chemical rockets. They are targeting us? Solon sighed. They are targeting our last position. They have no real-time tracking. They are firing at where we were, not where we are. Activate point defense lasers. Cleanse this nuisance from our sky. Brilliant threads of light reached out from the Judgment. Human intercontinental ballistic missiles, the pinnacle of 20th century terror, began to vanish in silent blossoms of fire. Their nuclear payloads detonated harmlessly in the void, short of their target. See, Solon said, no guidance, predictable. They waste their most powerful weapons in a futile prelate. New contacts, close contacts, emerging from the planetary gravity well and from behind orbital blind spots. Small craft, dozens of them. On the viewer, angular, aggressive shapes shot upwards on plumes of fire. They were not the graceful discs of Concorde shuttles. They were knives, dragons, predators etched in steel and ceramic. Human space-capable fighters, the X-42 Raptors, launched from hidden ground bases and from the sides of the heavily armored Odyssey station. They moved with a jarring, aggressive velocity, jinking and rolling without regard for G-force, limits that would pulp a Concorde pilot. Evasive pattern Delta, Solon barked, the first note of uncertainty entering his voice. The Judgment began to turn, its majestic bulk suddenly feeling cumbersome. In the cockpit of Raptor 1, Captain Marcus Reaper Thorne felt the familiar, crushing weight of acceleration. His displays were a chaotic symphony of data. All units, Reaper, execute. Bifrost, hit 'em where they ain't. Fox 3, he didn't fire energy bolts. From the undersides of his craft, long, sleek missiles dropped away, ignited and streaked ahead. They didn't fly straight. They corkscrewed, jinked, and employed random throttle bursts. Concorde point defense lasers tracked them, but their predictive algorithms, designed for logical flight paths, failed. Half the missiles got through. They didn't carry plasma warheads. They carried shaped charge, kinetic penetrators designed to crack bunkers. When they struck the Judgment's hull, they did not explode in a flashy fireball. They drilled. They used brute Newtonian force to punch through alloy plating and burrow deep before a secondary charge fragmented into a storm of white-hot shrapnel inside the ship's compartments. The Judgment shuddered. For the first time, damage alerts screamed across its bridge. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Atmosphere loss. Particle Lancer Array 3 is offline. How? Solon roared. Their weapons are primitive kinetics. Sir, they are using mass. Simple mass and velocity. Our shields are optimized for diffusing energy weapons. The kinetic penetration threshold is... It was deemed irrelevant against civilized species. Civilized. The word hung in the air as the human fighters, like angry hornets, swarmed around the wounded Leviathan. They fired more missiles, and now, from their noses, heavy-caliber rotary cannons began to spin. They didn't fire lasers or plasma. They fired solid slugs of depleted uranium at a rate of thousands per minute. A hailstorm of metal hammered the Judgment's sensor arrays and weapon emplacements, smashing them into ruin. On the ground, the response was escalating. From hidden silos across the planet, a second wave of rockets rose. These were different, smaller, faster, and their trajectories adjusted continuously. They were terrestrial anti-satellite missiles, hastily repurposed. They climbed past the atmosphere, not aiming for the Judgment itself, but for the space around it. They detonated, not in nuclear fire, but in silent, expanding clouds of tungsten rods, ball bearings, and shredded metal. A crude, omnidirectional shotgun blast filling a volume of space. The Judgment, trying to evade the fighters, plowed into several of these clouds. The screech of metal tearing was audible through the hull. All engines damaged. Primary power failing. We must withdraw, the helmsman cried. Solon, his dignity in tatters, could only nod. Jump to the rally point now, as the Judgment's battered form glowed with the gathering energy for a faster-than-light jump. A final, solitary weapon arrived. A single, ancient-looking projectile, launched from a ground-based platform in a place called North Dakota. It had been waiting for this moment. It was a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse weapon, a relic of Cold War thinking. It detonated 50 kilometers from the Judgment. A silent, invisible tsunami of electromagnetic energy washed over the ship. Every unshielded circuit fused, every active system, weapons, sensors, communications, and crucially, the delicate regulators for the FTL drive, flared and died. The Judgment's jump spark failed, leaving it stranded, bleeding air and momentum, a beached whale in the sea of space. In his bunker, General Miller received the report. Target is dead in the water, FTL disabled, weapons silent. He allowed himself one deep breath. Phase 2, send in the angels. The Judgment of Terra was dying. Emergency lights cast a hellish glow on corridors filled with smoke and the strange coppery scent of alien blood. Prelate Solon staggered towards the auxiliary command center, his mind reeling. This was impossible. It was a statistical absurdity. They had been defeated not by a superior technology, but by a cascade of inconveniences. By weapons they had deemed museum pieces. His ruminations were shattered by a new sound, a deep rhythmic thud-thud-thud that vibrated through the deck plates. It was the sound of magnetic boots hitting hull metal. Then came the sharper, more terrifying sound, the shriek of shaped, breaching charges cutting through bulkhead doors. "They're boarding us!" A Cathari warrior clicked, raising its plasma rifle, its limbs trembling. The door to the compartment blew inwards, not with a soft whoosh of a decompression charge, but with a deafening, concussive boom that stunned sensory organs. Through the smoke and debris came figures. They were not tall like the Ixchins, nor elegant like the Rill. They were squat, broad, encased in matte gray-powered armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their faceplates were blank, mirrored surfaces. On their shoulders, the flags of many nations were painted alongside a single unified symbol, a blue earth encircled by olive branches and a sword. One of them raised its weapon, not a sleek lancer, but a blocky, brutal thing with a large magazine. It fired, burt, short, controlled bursts. The sound was an ugly mechanical rip. The plasma rifle in the Cathari's hands exploded as a tungsten carbide round shattered its power core. The warrior fell, not cleanly vaporized, but torn apart in a mess of chitin and fluid. Solon froze. The humans moved with a terrifying economical purpose. They didn't float or glide, they stomped. They used hand signals, short, guttural words. Clear left, frag out, moving. One of them turned its mirrored gaze towards Solon. A synthesized voice emerged, cold and flat. You are the commander. You will order your crew to surrender. Solon drew himself up, summoning the last of his dignity. I am Prelate Solon of the Galactic Concord. I will not... The human didn't wait. It took 2 heavy steps forward and drove a gauntleted fist into Solon's midsection. The air left his body in a pained gasp. As he doubled over, the human grabbed a handful of his ornate robe and slammed him against a console. Wrong answer. The next one gets your bridge crew spaced. Order. Surrender. The sheer, brutal physicality of it was as shocking as the violence. This was not warfare as a contest of technological will. This was intimate, personal domination. With trembling hands, Solon keyed the all-ships address. This is Prelate Solon. All crew, cease resistance. Stand down. Across the ship, the sounds of battle sputtered and died, but the thud-thud-thud of human boots continued, a grim percussion of victory. The news of the Judgment's capture spread through the Concord fleet like a psychic shockwave. The swarm was momentarily forgotten. A pre-emergent species had not only repelled a Concord battlecruiser, they had boarded it, using tactics that seemed to belong in some prehistoric saga. The Concord High Command, in a panic, authorized a full-scale retaliatory strike. A full battle group, 3 more cruisers and escort vessels, would glass the human military installations from orbit. No more lessons, just annihilation. What they found was an empty battlefield. As the Concord fleet arrived in Sol, their sensors scanned for the massive energy signatures of human cities, power plants, and military bases. They found shadows. The cities were dark, their power grids offline. The great bases were silent, seemingly abandoned. Only the faint, chaotic buzz of encrypted low-frequency radio traffic hinted at activity, scattered and omnipresent like insects in tall grass. What are they doing? The new fleet commander, Archon Valerius himself, demanded from the bridge of the flagship Resplendent. Have they fled? Unclear, Archon, the sensor officer, droned. Biological signs are subsurface, everywhere. They have gone to ground. Then we dig them out. Target the coordinates of their former capitals, scour the surface. The Resplendent's main weapon charged. At that moment, 100 separate events occurred across the planet. In the Nevada desert, a concrete slab slid away. From the darkness, a colossal rust-colored gun elevated. It was not a missile launcher. It was a magnetic railgun, a 300-meter-long monster built into a mountain. It fired a 1-ton projectile of solid tungsten. There was no chemical explosion, just a deafening crack of splitting air as the round was accelerated to hypersonic velocity. It crossed the distance to low orbit in less than 20 seconds. The Concord destroyer, Lance of Piety, focusing its sensors on the planet, ceased to exist as the projectile converted its kinetic energy into a catastrophic release of heat and force, punching clean through its heart. From the oceans, previously silent submarines, now acting as remote relays, broadcast targeting data from a swarm of microsatellites humanity had launched in the chaotic hours after first contact. This data fed into mobile truck-based launchers hidden in forests, buried under highway overpasses, and disguised as commercial shipping containers. They didn't fire at the starships, they fired around them. The skies above the fleet erupted in a chaos of chaff, radar-reflecting filaments, and burning magnesium flares. To Concord's sensors, space itself seemed to boil. Then, from within this electronic storm, came the missiles. Old, slow, suborbital ballistic missiles, their nuclear payloads swapped for dense clouds of ball bearings and abrasive dust. They flew erratic, suicidal paths, saturating engagement zones. Concorde point defense systems, overwhelmed by false targets and physical obstruction, began to fail. A cruiser, the Chariot of Dawn, found its radiator fins clogged with molten slag. Its engines overheated and died, leaving it adrift. And then the humans attacked from below. From the dark side of the moon, which the Concorde had ignored as barren, a salvo of kinetic kill vehicles, rods of tungsten tipped with crude but effective chemical explosives, streaked down on purely ballistic trajectories. They struck the Resplendent's upper hull like the hammer of an angry god. Valerius was thrown from his command dais. Alarms he had never heard before screamed through the bridge. "Return fire! Target their launch sites!" But, Archon, the sites are mobile. They fire and move before our weapons can cycle. And the energy signatures are too faint. They use chemical propellants, not plasma. Our targeting systems filter them as background noise. It was a war of ghosts against giants. The humans fought with the planet itself as a weapon and a shield. They used their primitive, chemical explosives to create landslides that buried hidden bases. They used crude radio jammers to broadcast blinding noise on Concorde command frequencies. They even used salvaged chemical lasers, a technology the Concorde had abandoned millennia ago, to blinding effect against optical sensors precisely because no one thought to shield against such a low-energy weapon. On the ground, where Concorde shock troops landed in gleaming dropships to seize what they thought were command centers, they found hell. Human soldiers did not wear powered armor. They wore ghillie suits and used the rubble of their own cities as cover. They did not fire invisible beams. They fired bullets that came from nowhere, that ricocheted in ways that defied logic. They used simple, pressure-triggered explosives made from fertilizer and fuel oil. They used poisoned stakes in pits. They used terror. A Cathari warrior unit reported back, their communications laced with static and panic. The humans, they do not fight for positions. They fight for moments. They ambush, then vanish into tunnels. They have fouled the water with biological agents. They have strung wires at neck height. They are not soldiers, they are the planet itself, and it is trying to kill us. The turning point came over the Atlantic. The damaged, but still potent Resplendent had finally locked onto a major target, the human orbital station Odyssey. It was a fortress, yes, but a stationary one. Valerius, desperate for a victory, ordered all remaining weapons to bear, destroy it, wipe this symbol of their defiance from the sky. As the Resplendent prepared its final strike, a new signal appeared. Small, insignificant. A single tiny craft emerging from behind Odyssey. It was not a fighter, it was a construction pod, modified, and it was accelerating on a direct collision course. On the bridge of the Resplendent, the tactical officer dismissed it. A suicide run. Point defense will eliminate it. The pod weaved, employing crude but effective countermeasures, flares and chaff of a type not seen in the galaxy for 10,000 years. It got closer. The point defense lasers fired, searing its hull, but it kept coming, a speck of stubborn mortal rage. Inside the pod, Lieutenant Anya Petrova, a former asteroid miner from the Mars colonies, checked her readouts. Her life support was failing. Hull integrity was at 15%. She had a vid link open to Odyssey. "You don't have to do this, Anya. We can—" General Miller's voice was strained. "With all due respect, sir," Anya coughed, the air growing thin. "They're pointing a gun at my home, and I'm holding a rock." Her rock was the pod's reactor, rigged to overload, and its cargo bay filled with several tons of industrial-grade mining explosives. The Resplendent loomed in her viewport, huge and beautiful and alien. She thought of the ice caps of Mars, the oceans of Earth. "Tell my mom I love her. Tell her I hit the bastard." She pushed the throttle to its shattered limit. The Concorde point defense, calibrated for distant high-tech missiles, failed to track the sheer, dumb mass of the incoming pod at the last second. It struck the Resplendent amidships. The explosion was not the clean flash of a plasma containment breach. It was a dirty, brutal, expanding orange fireball of chemical fury, followed by the secondary, deeper blast of the reactor. It ripped the great ship in two. In the silence that followed on the human command channels, broken only by static, the war ended. The remaining Concorde ships, leaderless and psychologically shattered, broke off. They jumped to FTL, not in retreat but in rout. The aftermath was not quiet, but it was one-sided. The galactic Concorde was in disarray. The swarm, sensing weakness, pressed its advantage. It was only the arrival of human military advisors, hard-eyed men and women who looked at swarm tactics and saw a biological puzzle to be solved with flamethrowers, massed kinetics, and improvised radiation bombs that stabilized the lines. In the rebuilt council chamber, now scarred and pragmatic, the testimony of Prelate Solon was heard. He was a broken figure, but his account was precise. They do not have superior technology, he said, his voice hollow. They have superior context. They evolved on a world where every leaf, every stream, every shadow could harbor death. Their creativity is born not from a search for elegance, but from a necessity to survive another day. They do not see a starship. They see a machine with weaknesses. They do not see an invincible warrior. They see a target. They weaponize everything, physics, psychology, their own history of pain. To call them primitive is the most fatal error one can make. They are fundamental. They remind the universe of the basic truth that all advanced life seeks to forget, that existence is a fight, and they have been practicing for 1,000,000 years. On Earth, General Miller stood on a rebuilt balcony, looking at a sky once again clear of alien warships. Colonel Chen joined him, handing him a data slate. The Concorde is suing for peace, a real one this time. They're offering protectorate status, for them, against the swarm. Miller nodded, his face weary. Tell them we'll talk, but on our terms. And get me the schematics for that swarm hive ship. The engineers think they can retrofit a mass driver to fire canisters of aerosolized neurotoxin and rust. Chen allowed a small smile, improvised and dirty. Damn right, Miller said, turning his gaze back to the stars. No longer just points of light, but destinations and potential battlefields. That's how Deathworlders fight. We don't have the fancy guns, but we've got the will to use the tools we have to their most devastating, brutal, and effective end. And we will never, ever stop. The lesson was etched into the memory of the galaxy. Never underestimate the inhabitants of a death world, for when the calm, civilized lights of the galaxy begin to flicker out, it is the ones who have always lived in the dark, who have learned to fight with rocks and rage and relentless, cunning hope, who will step forward to save it. Not because they are heroes, but because survival is the only thing they have ever known.